Morning, Commissioner Fuentes.
Good morning. How are you? You hear me?
Good morning, Commissioner Henry.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, man.
Good morning, Chairman Burse.
Morning, Terrence. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Melissa up to Patrice is from Grant. Penny is Penny. And I don't know program yet.
Good morning. Hello. Can you hear me? Respond.
That's you, Commissioner Glenn?
No,
This
this
is
is
Jim Glenn. Good morning.
Okay.
Good hearing your voice.
Good morning.
Mr. Brown, just hold on a second, okay?
yes.
So we almost got a full house of commissioners this morning. I see this right.
Yeah, the only one, and then
Commissioner Worth.
Commissioner Worth just texted me that he won't be able to make it.
Okay. Well, with that said, let's call this meeting the March 17th, 2022 meeting of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights to order. For first two items of business is a confirmation of the quorum and confirmation of public notice by our executive director.
We do have a quorum and public notice was sent.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any requests for public participation in this meeting?
We do have one. Mr. Richard Brown just wanted to jump on and say hello. Mr. Brown, and you'll have to unmute. I muted you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to say thank you for allowing me this opportunity to participate and join with you all this morning, which carrying out your responsibilities as commissioners of human rights. And I just want to say it's. This meeting is being recorded. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and just want to again say thank you and an opportunity to see real faces of individuals who's serving on the commission this year. And I want to say thank you for all those who I served with for over 12 years with the Commission on Human Rights, Ms. Fox, Ms. Mary Ann Taylor, Juan Pena, and John from Northern Kentucky, and Ms. Aaron. And so I don't want to hold you up. I know you all have a busy day, and just say thank you again and keep on serving the state of Kentucky. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you for those comments, Mr. Brown. Issue, there was only one. So the next item of business is for the approval of minutes of our meeting held on February 17th, 2022. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Glenn, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second by Commissioner Shaw.
Okay, been moved and seconded that the minutes of the February 17th, 2022 meeting be approved. All those in favor, raise your hand. Probably easier way to do it. Okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Those minutes are approved. Next item of business, we move to our section reports, and our first one up is a report from the executive director.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our March meeting. Today, I wanted to start just by saying thank you again for your input on our restructuring of the meetings. I think that our last meeting was very engaging, very informative, and I appreciate you all bearing with us as we transition over to doing things a little differently. A couple quick updates. I wanted to start and let you meet our new managing attorney who started the 1st of March. His name is Joe Dunman, and I'll let Joe introduce himself before I continue.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you. My name is Joe Dunman. Terrence has hired me as the new managing attorney. I'll tell you about myself a little bit. So I've been practicing law in Kentucky for 10 years now. I'm a graduate of the University of Louisville Law School. The first 5 years of my career, I spent doing private practice civil rights cases, mostly Kentucky Civil Rights Act cases. I took numerous cases with age discrimination, race discrimination, religious discrimination, etc. My major case that I worked on was the Obergefell versus Hodges gay marriage case. I was one of the Kentucky attorneys who represented the Kentucky plaintiffs all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. After about 5 years of practice, I then went to Morehead State University, where I've been an assistant professor of legal studies for the past 5 years, teaching a wide array of classes, much like law school, but to an undergrad program designed to move students into law school or paralegal practice. I really love teaching, but I also really love practicing civil rights law and representing the people of Kentucky and helping them achieve equality and fairness. And so I'm here at the commission to pursue that mission, and I believe strongly in the commission's purpose, its statutory command, and I'm very excited to be here. And I thank you all for welcoming me.
Well, Joe, I know I can say on behalf of all of the commissioners, welcome. We welcome you here. Glad to have you on board. And I know we all look forward to working with you, in terms of some conversations with Terrence already. You hit the ground running, you having some impact. And so we really look forward to really moving our agenda. And thank you for having the faith to join and come and join us and work in this very important work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Joe has already been a really good addition. We've had some really positive conversations in our panels, and just his vision for what he sees from that position much aligns with things that we've discussed as a commission overall and things that I've hoped to see within the agency. So looking forward to seeing where we can go with that. A couple other things. I did want to let you all know the website is now updated. As a follow-up to our last meeting, I was able to get the permissions released to let me make changes. The person who manages the back-end development for the website is a contractor for the state who lives in Florida. And unbeknownst to me, he got called up to active duty. And so that's why he didn't check his email. He was flying fighter jets. I had someone that went in and allowed me to make a few changes. So all of those things should be updated if you want to check it out and have any updates you want to send my way. I now do have the permissions to edit them again. For this month, what I wanted to do is going in line with what we talked about and how we shifted our last month. This month it's Women's History Month, and what we've done in our social media and some of our outreach is talking about important contributions of women in Kentucky to history. But one thing that we don't talk about is some of the issues that are unique to women in the areas that we work in. And so I've invited Art Crosby from Lexington Fair Housing to present to you all about a little bit about himself, about Lexington Fair Housing, and then about how some of these issues might be unique to women that we don't think about. So I'll cede the floor to Art, but I'll bring up his presentation, and then at the end, or if you during the course of his presentation have questions, just click the button to raise your hand, and then we can stop and let you ask the question or just reserve questions for the end. So Art, I'll bring this up and you can go ahead and get started.
Great. Thanks for having me here, Terrence. And absolutely, I'm happy to have the questions as we go, make it a conversation if they'd like, or, at the end, whatever's easiest for everybody else. Again, my name's Art Crosby. I'm the Executive Director at the Lexington Fair Housing Council. We're a nonprofit agency that operates throughout Kentucky. I know it says Lexington in our name, which is sometimes a little bit of a misnomer. There used to be a Louisville Fair Housing office, but they went out of business about 10, 15 years ago. So we serve the entire state. Again, we are what's called a FIP. You all are what's called a FAP. We both get our funding from the HUD Fair Office and Equal Opportunity, Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office. So we're kind of sister agencies, the FIP and the FAP. Well, you all are the government entity that actually decides cases and handles cases. We're the entity that's designed to provide some advocacy, help make those referrals, get those cases started and initiated. And that's the way that kind of our agencies are designed to work together through the HUD program. Part of what we do with that is we do a testing program. So we will go throughout the state and we'll do tests. We'll have, African-American white individuals, see if they're treated differently, a family with children, a family without, individual with a disability, individual without. And we do that through housing providers throughout the state. That's part of what HUD pays us to do. That's part of our mission. We also try to do as best we can. We take calls from the housing industry. Our goal is to prevent housing discrimination. So we don't get paid anymore or make any more money to catch somebody and have a big case. We would much, much, much prefer to stop it from happening in the first place. It's much in our benefit if they reach out to us and say, hey, what's the issues for doing this? We have a housing provider who's willing to listen. We can get things fixed. That's always our goal. Again, we do take cases, we do advocate, and we know that through your all's mechanisms, we can make big change through litigation, but that sometimes takes, it can take 3, 4, 5 years to get something done. It's a lot easier on our client if we can just keep them in the home. So if somebody comes to us, our first approach is to see if we can work out something with the landlord. Can we just educate? Can we keep our person in their home? And that's part of the education outreach we do. And we do really well and have done for the 20 something years I've been here with Juan Pena, We try our best to get out. It is difficult, just like you all. My office only has 5 people on staff, so there's a limited ability to outreach throughout the state. You'll have a few more people, but even then, we both realize the need to use partners to help us get our mission out. That's kind of the overview of us. I want to talk now a little bit about what we're here, which is for Women's History Month, kind of the specific things that my office sees on discrimination based on a person's sex, gender issues, and it really comes down to, these are kind of the overviews of what we find. One is just, a landlord saying, I'm not going to rent to you because you're a woman or a man. That we tend not to find that as much. It does happen, but that's not the biggest issue we see. You also see, sometimes we'll see a source of income issue where I'll give an example, a mortgage company that says you're pregnant, so we're not sure that your income's going to continue, so we're not going to sure whether or not we're going to give you the mortgage. That would be gender discrimination. We do see some of that, but that's not the biggest one either. The 2 biggest issues we face in gender discrimination that we come with on a regular basis are domestic violence and sexual harassment. So those are going to be the ones I'll talk a little bit more about today. But those are the big housing issues that we see. The other ones that we see, gender identity and sexual orientation. And we know that also familial status discrimination disparately impacts women. Single women with children are the ones who really we have a lot of familial status cases with. So that's kind of an overview of what we see. Starting with domestic violence, just because why is it a gender issue? It's a gender issue because of who it disparately impacts. 1 in 3 women will experience physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. 1 in 4 homeless women report that domestic violence was what caused them to be homeless. And of mothers with children who have experienced homelessness, 80% report previous experience of domestic violence. So we know domestic violence has a big issue on housing. And we know that it's something that impacts women specifically, and it disparately impacts women in a way. And that's part of how we approach those cases. What we'll see is there was not only is fair housing has protected those types of domestic violence. So under fair housing, it's been illegal to just say, I'm not going to rent to you because you're a victim of domestic violence. It's been that way since gender was protected in 1988. But in Kentucky, we actually do have some bills that came in and created specific protections as well. So Terrence, if you want to keep moving forward, the next one. Here's the things we do tend to see in domestic violence issues. So domestic violence victim, survivor might be evicted because they've called the police. The landlords decide that they're disturbing neighbors, so they just want to end the lease because they're quote unquote too much trouble. Those are cases we take. We can see evictions or charges for damage to property from a DV incident. We've got multiple cases right now where landlord is looking to kick out the woman who's living there because her ex busted in the front door, tore up the property. Can't do that either. We see some where the landlord will refuse to rent to survivors of domestic violence. So when the landlord figures out that they're coming from a domestic violence shelter, they don't want to rent to them. We've had cases with the commission where the landlord's like, well, my parents live nearby and I'm just worried that the abuser will come back and cause problems. Can't do that. And we have cases where you have a survivor who has an EPO, wants to get out of the lease so that they can find safe housing. And we have landlords who sometimes will refuse to let them out of their lease or refuse to let them move. That also would be a fair housing violation. Okay, Terrence, next one. This is the state bill that came in place. It was about 5 years ago, I think. KCHR came in and helped us get this passed, but it prohibits the landlord from terminating a lease, failing to renew a lease, or refusing to enter into a lease, or retaliating against an individual because they have an emergency protective order, a domestic violence order, or an interpersonal order. Interpersonal order was one that was created to broaden the DVO to cases where the person doesn't actually live with them, but you could still have stalking, that type of thing. So that covers most of our domestic violence. Anytime you have a landlord having issues with domestic violence, again, the way that our 2 agencies work is it's usually helpful if we are working with that client, because we can advocate for that client. We can talk them through, here's your domestic violence. We have social workers who are working on staff. We have staff who's, we just are set up to do more intake and hand holding with clients through the process. referring to our domestic violence shelters throughout the state, making sure that they're connected with that, working potentially on their eviction issues, helping them work with legal aid to make sure that they're not evicted, helping figure out, we do a lot of situations where people will contact us. And this will be big on the one we're talking next. People will call us and they'll talk about how they're not being treated fair. They might talk to me for 30 minutes about the leaking ceiling, how their landlord won't return the calls, how they're paying this much and the landlord won't fix anything. And on the 35th minute, they'll get around to saying, oh, and by the way, the landlord's sexually harassing me. And the issue, you have to be there and you have to listen to the conversation all the way through, because they're not calling sometimes about the sexual harassment, because they've just unfortunately lived in this situation where they've just come to accept that's what happens to them because of their poverty, because of their status, because of their housing vulnerability. And they'll be making all these complaints. So part of our job is to help listen through them, figure out where we can help, figure out what is discrimination issues and what we can actually work with. So Terrence, the next one, as we move to sexual harassment, there's the two types of sexual harassment that we encounter, the quid pro quo, which is services in exchange for sexual acts in hostile environment. And just talking about what I see on a regular basis, there is a pattern that has evolved in sexual harassment cases that we see in Kentucky, and it is mostly younger women, very housing vulnerable, sometimes with felonies in their past, sometimes coming out of addiction, desperate for housing. And it's usually older, in their 60s or 70s men who providing housing, but taking advantage. The other thing that we see is when we see one of these cases, it's usually not unique. Usually it's something where there have been other cases tied to it. Other women have also been affected. It is a power issue. It is one where one party taking advantage of another party's vulnerability and, essentially holding their housing hostage unless they agree to the sexual advances. It just gets, these are very difficult cases to deal with. The clients are usually going through quite a bit emotionally. They're in a very, very difficult situation. But the commission has done a great job with us as a big partner in dealing with these cases. Here's the next slide. This is one where we started with the commission. The commission helped us get this case initiated. The commission helped us start digging out some new witnesses. We had one client that led to other clients, and eventually it led, I think, to 12 clients total that were impacted. And this was when the Department of Justice eventually picked up for us. And the husband and wife agreed to pay $230,000 to settle against the female tenants that the husband had been sexually harassing to the point of, almost sexual assault, essentially, is what was going on with these cases. Again, this is not unique. We see, and we've seen more of these lately. I think as we see more and more of a tighter rental market, people become more and more desperate for housing, and people will take more and more advantage of people as that happens. And these are things that are desperately going to impact women, and they're desperately going to impact women with children. Next one. So the one other thing I wanted to just get in here as we talk about gender, because this is what I think is where the new edge of fair housing and what we're going to see in the next 5-10 years become huge. And that is the fact that sexual orientation and gender identity are now protected as gender discrimination. Kentucky, you initially had, Louisville was the first city to protect sexual orientation, gender identity. Lexington followed, took a while. You had the tiny town of Vico. The commission did a lot of good work with promoting that, and you had more and more counties. But really, as of now, every county in Kentucky protects sexual orientation and gender identity based on this Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court decision was an employment decision, but it applies just as much, the reasoning applies just as much to housing, but it, for the commission's purposes, both employment and housing. It's the 2020 Supreme Court case 6-2 that essentially says those are going to be covered. The point I'm making here, though, is that when I talk to my daughter who's in high school, when I see the kids in school, gender is a different idea to them. It is a fluid idea. There is the idea about pronouns that I think you're going to have a lot of landlords who will react strongly to when this new age comes and confronts them. And I think that's something that as a commission And as my office, it's important that we kind of get in front of these things, help educate landlords, prepare them for these gender issues that are coming their way so that they don't have trouble, and then, you know, guide them to the right direction when they do violate the law. We do have a Sexual Assault Awareness and Fair Housing Month event in April 27th. There's the registration link, and basically this is kind of going over with Department of Justice. We'll have people there talking as well, just some of this current things and talking about protections, talking about what you can do in sexual harassment cases, and talking about the enforcement mechanisms that are in place. So that's on April 27th. And I think that covers everything, Terrence, but I would love to answer any questions or just hear any other input.
Any questions from any commissioners? Commissioner Cheney.
Thank you, Art, for your presentation. That was very informative. And the April 27th event, is that virtual? Is that in person?
It is. It's virtual.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I can share that link out after this meeting so you all have that to register if you wanted to attend.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I would just like to commend.
Just a minute before you do that. You know, one of the things I want you to go back and reemphasize, because when I came on the commission, Louisville Fair Housing played a very prominent role in all of the discussions by the commission. But one of the points you made was that Lexington Fair Housing does not make any more money or less money, whether the commission takes a case or not.
No, we don't.
In fact, I want to make certain that's recorded.
Yeah,
I want to make certain that's recorded on the record.
No, I will say, so there are cases where, so I'll give you an example. Sometimes we'll do a testing case. And because part of what we do with testing, we go and find out, you know, if somebody is refusing to rent to African Americans, if somebody's steering families with children to a different place. You know, unfortunately, if somebody, we do a lot of service animal cases because that is a big thing lately. If somebody's refusing to let somebody in with a wheelchair, right? So our preference is we always, you know, our main thing is to be an advocate, but we also will have cases where HUD wants us to do our own testing. And if we find our own, then we'll initiate our own complaint, kind of like what a commissioner initiate complaint would be. But if we find violations, we'll initiate our own complaint. Usually as we negotiate those, we try to get donations, but there are times where we will ask for, you know, there needs to be some, I'm a true believer that everybody who's violating the law needs to have education, but sometimes writing a check makes you remember stuff more than anything else. So we will, and depending on the violation, right? If somebody's saying no blacks, I refuse and refuses to change, we're going to go after that pretty heavy. And especially if they, you know, like whatever it is, if they're refusing to change and they're digging in their heels and they make you fight it all the way, you know, I'm not saying we won't ask for compensation, you know, we'll ask for some recovery. Usually we ask for donations. I will tell you at this point, whatever we get in recovery is not going to cover the time and expense that we put into those cases. And it's very rare that we even do those cases because usually we're seeking recovery for a client or we're looking for a donation. There have been a few times where my office has had a $500 payment, stuff like that. It is not, again, and those, when we do get those, we have to report that back to HUD and HUD gets to decide what to do with the money. So it's not dollars that actually would go to us directly anyways. But my point being, when those cases drag on, and it makes my life more difficult, there's no incentive for us to have a case that drags on. But the other thing I was going to say is when those cases do drag on, you all have had really good staff that helps us through that. You know, again, we deal with Juan on the outreach, but Aaron Spalding and their crew and the investigators have been really helpful, really communicative. If we have questions, they respond. I've never had any trouble reaching out to people. You know, there are other commissions where they're still learning or finding their way. Your commission is on the ground running. They know what they're doing. Colt Sells, since he took over, has been a really good change for you all in terms of having somebody who's an advocate, who's willing to push cases that need to be pushed. Have not met your new hire, but I am looking forward to that. I think you all are in a great staffing position right now. I think Terrence has helped push you all in that way.
Thank you for that, Terrence.
I think Commissioner Cheney had a question.
Go ahead.
So, one of the economic results of the pandemic is that women are leaving the workforce at an extraordinary pace. There's a big gender gap, primarily due to childcare issues. Have you? I know your area is housing, but anecdotally, do you hear what's going on, sort of on the ground around employment issues? Somebody, are you hearing anything about that at all? I mean, are women, saying that, I can't pay my rent because I couldn't get paid because I couldn't show up for work, and I couldn't show up for work because of childcare issues? I mean, is there anything going on in that space that would be helpful for us to be aware of?
Absolutely. I think, to me, it all comes back to that March 2020, right? When the pandemic hit, we clearly quickly figured out that the pandemic was having a disparate impact on people on the lower level of the economic spectrum, which included minorities, women, and especially single women with children. And the idea, to be honest, the pandemic didn't economically affect me hardly at all, right? Like my office, my office already had done a lot of virtual stuff, right? We have one of our staff members in Moorhead, one's in Louisville. We were working remotely. We could continue to do all that. It's the other people who were being impacted. And when we started talking about evictions and the evictions that started happening, evictions were disproportionately affecting minorities, individuals on fixed income, people with fixed income, sometimes at least you were continuing to get your income, but the disability, and then especially women with children. So we started looking at those stats. Who is getting evicted? Who needs help? And I think that's where I think, the commission we should all be paying attention to. Now, a lot of money and resources have been going into the eviction prevention. Louisville's done a great job. Some cities better than others. But I think that idea of single women with children, because the ability to find childcare, my own staff, I have on my staff 3 women of color with children, and their ability to find stable, consistent childcare right now is just crazy, because childcare closes constantly, or when it's open, in and out. And my job, that works okay, but there's a lot of jobs you just lose your job automatically. When one hiccup with childcare, you lose your job, and their ability to maintain stable employment is just going to continue to struggle. And even though we all think like the pandemic might be at the end, I guess the after economic effects of that are going to last for years and years.
So are there, and I guess this is just as much a question, not only for you, but for our own staff, if the inability to show work is related to a child care issue and the employer terminates the individual, is that fully within their purview? Is that?
I think those are going to be individual case by case, right? I'm not going to be able to answer that on a case, but I do think systemically, when we look at, do we have the proper housing options that cover everybody, right? Are people getting priced out of the market? How does the eviction court work? Are we targeting the right people with help and assistance? And when we do it, are we doing it in a way that helps the people who need the help? I think those are all things we can, I've historically, people would talk about Section 8 source of income, right? Like, are those things that are going into place? Are you discriminating against Section 8 just because you don't like a certain set of people living there? Louisville passed their source of income ordinance, and we've been gradually working, and it has not stopped housing in Louisville, right? It has not put any landlord out of business yet. I think there's ways that we can do that. We're not going to fix any of those problems, right? We're not going to fix any of the economic issues, but we can make it easier and more fair.
And just to what Art just said, to that point, we do have, I mentioned at our last meeting that I was working on it in Hopeful, we do have legislation filed to protect source of income statewide, to be able to ensure some of those things are counted and to help address housing issues. And so that's filed. It was moving pretty well with some good support. There has been a little holdup with some pushback from some landlords, but I talked to Art last week, and we might have some people that can help speak to why it's not that big of an issue to allow for the source of income protection. So that's something that's in the works and upcoming, hopefully. And then I think you were saying something, Commissioner Fuentes. My apologies.
No problem. Yes, a really good job for the presentation. Good information. Just I have a quick question. Do you have anybody in your staff who speaks Spanish? You know, somebody that can assist Hispanic person that, you know, could not speak English.
Yes,
and can
we
help
do.
this person?
So we do. We also use language line because there are, you know, a ton of languages. That's one of the things that I learned pretty early. And it's, you know, I thought, well, we got our Spanish interpreter, we got it covered. It's not true, right? You know, we've had ones where literally people will come in and language line couldn't even provide the service just because it was so unique. But those are things you just have to work through. One of the other interesting things that we've just started doing this year is we are testing housing authorities and different subsidized housing providers to see if they are providing the language access that they're required to. So one of the things we use testers to, we will have Spanish speaking people call housing authorities and just see whether or not the housing authorities are able to respond.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So aren't one of the other things I think that we see, particularly it's across the state, but in Louisville particularly, is that when people of color apply for a bank loan to purchase a home, they are declined at a rate almost twice that of non-minority folks. And it almost, you know, it on paper, it almost always drives back to debt to income ratio or, you know, some of the underwriting criteria. But if you look at those statistics kind of holistically, there are very clear disparities. And so, you know, I'm wondering, you know, to what extent do you hear about folks, because we do talk a lot about rental housing, but we've got equivalent issues over on the home ownership side of the world. Can you
Yes. So
share your insight on that?
And I think that ties into your earlier comment too, with the effects of that pandemic that we will see continue to play out. You know, the home ownership inequality was horrible before, and it's going to get much, much worse afterward. And we know home ownership is the tool that people use for wealth accumulation. We know that the past impact of segregation and intentional redlining by Kentucky and by the governments have impacted the home ownership rates that we have today. And we have not figured out a way, and I do not have in my mind I've studied this for a while. I don't know how to fix the kind of situation. You know, I use the analogy of we've set up a system where people have been playing the Monopoly game, won't let a whole group of individuals play, you know, for 7-8 rounds. Then on the 9th round, they say, okay, now you can start playing after somebody else has bought up all the homes and property. Now you can start playing, and we'll act like it's a fair game because the rules apply to everybody now. And that's, you know, that's not the way the system works. Yes, I do feel that's one of the downsides, because we did create so much of that legacy. You could almost go to the point now where even if we eliminated all intentional housing discrimination, you're still those legacies are still so impactful. It's still going to have the same kind of, so 2 parts. I think the commission and my office has two obligations. And one is to stop this discrimination that is occurring, but we also have that obligation to try to do what we can to rectify the past legacy, to at least educate people about that past legacy, and to figure out ways to take steps to try to address that. And some of those are figuring out home ownership programs, working with home ownership programs. There are some really good home ownership programs in Louisville, Lexington. There's some good ones throughout rural. It's one of the challenges that the commission has is, Louisville and Lexington, Bowling Green, every city is unique. And for you all to try to kind of look at them all in a whole becomes very difficult. But there are some really creative approaches that people have, the land trust that the Louisville is working on. And then even when you do have home ownership pushes in different areas, how you avoid that gentrification that eventually leads to displacement, urbanization, right? I mean, there are just complete challenges to that. But I don't have any easy answers on any of those.
Well, because Louisville's got a 42% homeownership gap between white households and households. I think Fayette County is something like 39%. That's huge. I mean, that's your ability to have a home equity loan, send your kids to college, start your own business, all the, the different wealth accumulation things. And part of that ties back to, and this again is very much a housing issue. If you've got a house in West Louisville or the East End in Lexington, and it is on the same acreage and looks exactly like a house somewhere else in Lexington or somewhere else in Louisville, simply by virtue of the fact that it's in the West End or it's in the East End, depending on the geography, it's going to appraise at a fraction of what that house will appraise for elsewhere.
So,
what, if anything, is being done to bring some parity?
So some of the stuff, like we are looking at the appraisal algorithms, right? There's a lot of work kind of being done on that. And do they have disparate impact in the way that they're approaching stuff? We're involved in a case with Redfin right now where Redfin as a realtor would not, they basically would only provide realtor services in certain areas of Louisville because they would have to hit above a certain price point. Even though the economics, they would still be able to get paid no matter, they would still target certain price points below which they wouldn't provide any services. And part of what we're saying is if you are not providing housing services below certain price points, it's got a disparate impact on the groups we've talked about. And it's also not letting people have that opportunity to enter into the housing market, which is part of what we need. Like we know it is hard to make that initial step into the housing market, right? Buying that first home, once you buy the first home, it's a little bit easier to move from there. But when you create so many impediments to being able to even get into the market in the first place, I mean, that's some of the stuff we're really trying to focus on.
Thank you.
Any other questions of anyone?
So,
again, Art, go ahead.
Sorry.
Darren.
Go ahead. My apologies.
No, that's fine. Good, proceed. I was just going to say thank Art for the presentation. It's very, very informative. Great information. And to Commissioner Cheney's question about and yours, you brought up in terms of addressing the inequities that have been built over time. According to the legislature in certain states and in Kentucky, that doesn't exist. So we'll deal with it. Terrence.
And thank you, Art. I think that in the future, I hope that we can really expand on the work that we're doing together. It was really good. Art and I had a good sit down last week, and we have some things we can work on moving forward. We also, for some of the cases, just as an update to you all and circling back, some of the cases that we do have still tied up, Art and I are bringing our respective HUD managers together to try to figure out a resolution to those, because we have differing guidance on how we can or should proceed with them. And so once we have that joint meeting, we'll be able to resolve those cases, which will really bring us up to date as a commission. A couple other things that weren't in my written report. I mentioned that the Senate budget came out and it was a little bit more favorable to us than the House budget. not as favorable as the governor's budget, but yesterday, Brandon helped me put together a really definitive showing of what the budgets look like across the spectrum. So the governor's budget, the House budget, the Senate budget, in comparison to the things that we need. And I have been in conversation with legislators for conference committee to incorporate those numbers to try to get even more of a raise of our appropriation. So I'm actually, after this meeting, going to Frankfurt to have a couple conversations with some of the legislators on appropriations to bring that into conference committee. So budget looking better. Then two other things just that I mentioned as we hopefully today, but the Crown Act, which we talked about at our last meeting, that was heard before the House Judiciary Committee. It was the first time that they'd ever taken that up after years and years of it being proposed. And I testified with the representative who was bringing it, Representative Scott, as well as some students who were pushing for that as well. And that passed out of the House committee. And it could be heard in the full House as early as this afternoon. It probably won't be until tomorrow because there were some questions I had to answer last night from a few legislators about health and safety standards in relation to the law. So it could be heard today, probably tomorrow, but the numbers look good for passage in the full House, and there's already a commitment in the Senate to hear it if it gets over there. The last thing, and this is something I think that loops into this conversation, but any issues that you all think should be brought to light, I have been asked, or I've talked to the Courier about being a regular contributor about issues in this space. And so any issues that you want to bring light to, if you want to let me know and give me some topics or whatever, I do have the space now to write something and they can highlight that issue in the Courier, in the opinion section. A couple have been in the Sunday forum section. One, and part of that also loops into some questions that I've had from you all about the issues going on in the local jail, for example. And so I did have something that was published on the issues in the jail, and especially the disproportionate representation in the jails. And so there are things that, as they come up, if you have thoughts, just to let me know, and I can see about getting that uplifted in the Courier and possibly the Herald as well. And I think you had a question about that, Vice Chair Smith.
Yes, thank you. I did want, this may be better for new business, but I thank you for bringing this up in your report. I have to leave very shortly for a press conference. It was scheduled for 2, but it's been moved to 10. And so I have to leave shortly. I was very moved by the article that's in our book this month about the jail and the mental health issues that seemingly are not being addressed, the staffing. And I know that Chair Burse is with NAACP. There are other organizations that are already engaged. But I wondered if we, as the Commission on Human Rights, have some authorities on bringing this to a stronger forefront legally, and calling for an investigation or pushing for hearing of some sort, because to me, these activities are quite concerning and they do not seem to have a very strong response from our local government that I feel that it should. And it's quite concerning that so many are moving to suicide attempts and other factors. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up. This may be a special project of the commission, if that could be allowable, or if it is something in writing, or if it is some kind of hearing that we could call with the council and the mayor's office or something, to bring this to the forefront and get to a resolve about it. And I just wanted to mention that today.
You know, I guess to respond to that, and Terrence, you can take it up, the commission under statute does have the ability to hold hearings. So we'll spend, I guess, more time on it at the end of the agenda on the new business. But, I think we need to probably explore whether under that authority there's something we can do, but we'll talk about it.
And the last small, and we'll circle back on that, I assume, in new business, but the last update, just letting you all know that we are, as of now, back in the office and monitoring the health and safety protocols and the rise, and now the incoming in the next few weeks of the BA2 variant as well. But just keep being mindful of those things for the time being. Those who feel safe to return have returned or are returning, and I will update you all if and when any of that changes. That was all that I had for today. If anyone had any questions from the written piece or from what we've discussed, please let me know.
Any questions for Terrence? Okay, hearing none. Thank you for that, Terrence. Very, very informative report for you, and especially the report from Lexington Fair Housing Corporation. We appreciate you putting that together. It's been very informative for, at least for me, and hopefully for all the other commissioners. Next item on our agenda is the budget and personnel. Brandon.
You have my report before you. We are closely watching I would assume that the joint committee should release their budget. Actually, I mean, they have to vote on it in a week, so should be coming very soon. So if there are any questions, I'll field those at this time.
Any budget questions for Brandon? Anyone? Not hearing or seeing anyone. We'll next move to enforcement. Aaron.
Hello, everybody. We have 17 cases today for your consideration. It is 2 conciliations, 1 reconsideration, 11 no probable cause cases, 2 withdrawal without settlements, and 1 withdrawal. If y'all have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them.
Commissioner Fuentes.
Yes, I'm reading on page 29 that the enforcement supervisor have been working to reduce case age. So first, I want to say thank you to Erin, for the really good job, and especially to Claudia Peraza, is an officer, and I see that she has been dealing with right now 25 cases on the open house investigation. So I just want to say thank you very much for that. I'm going to case 9378E. 1 second. Sorry, I'm just going through.
Is that the one on page 161?
I think so. Or I cannot find it here, but just on the first paragraph, I'd say that that the person, one second. What page is it, Sullivan, please?
161.
Yeah, on the first paragraph, it said that she was terminated from employment on the basis of her race, Hispanic. And I would say that I think it should be based of a national origin. Just a comment, because Hispanic is from my understanding, it's not a race. So basically, he looks that she was the issue was regarding his or her national origin. I don't know what do you think, Erin.
You're correct. Hispanic is a national origin, so that should have been filed under national origin and not race.
Okay, this is the only comment that I have. I'm sorry it took me so long to check it, but again, really appreciate your good job, especially to Claudia Peraza. I know that she has been with the commission we say couple of years, so it's amazing how far she have gone. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Aaron on any of the cases that are pending for action today? Commissioner Cheney.
Yeah. Aaron, thank you. I noticed that a lot of the age cases, the length is going down, and I know you all are working extremely hard. I had a question about 1190 EA on page 143. This is the case where there were parents, I believe, with 3 children that went to a retail establishment. The children, all 3 were unmasked. And they were declined the opportunity to go in and shop because of the CDC masking guidelines, right? So my question on this one, it relates specifically to the child with autism, and did they offer any sort of a reasonable accommodation for the child with autism in relation to the masking guidance?
I am looking through it.
This is sort of one of those.
Yeah, this is a case where none of the 3 children had masks on, and only one had a disability. So they were asked to put the mask on, and the respondent told them, they had to wear a mask. And the complainant said that the one child had an exemption from wearing the mask, but the other couldn't give a reason for the other 2. I can get Wanda Melvin on here. She's actually the investigator for this case. But I think it was a thing where they just refused to wear the mask. Okay. There was one child that was disabled, but that doesn't, only that child would be exempt. The other 2 wouldn't be exempt. The other 2 would still have to put on the mask because they didn't have a disability.
Right. And I understood that. What I couldn't understand was whether or not the retail establishment attempted to make a reasonable accommodation for the child with autism, whether it be a face shield or no masking or what have you. I can't really speak to the other 2 children because apparently neither of them have a disability. But I guess I was curious as to whether or not the establishment whether or not through our process we could identify whether or not the establishment itself understood that there should have been some reasonable accommodation for the child with the disability.
It looks what happened. I just texted Wanda, so she should be jumping on it. She can kind of get further into if there was an accommodation responded. But it looks like when they were asked to put on the mask, they left.
They just left.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I guess you never know if they would have masked 2 of the 3 children, or If they just threw up their hands and left, it's more of a question of whether or not we had a comfort level that the establishment itself understood the distinction.
I'm pulling the file too. Hold on one second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, I got Wanda here. She couldn't get on her computer.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Wanda, how are you?
Fine. Yes.
My question was around the 1190 PA, where the parents had the 3 children, one of whom had a disability, autism. The children weren't wearing masks. I never could really understand if there was any reasonable accommodation offered for the child who has autism, who might have a texture, tactile sensitivity, touch sort of thing, and who likely could have gone unmasked or used a face shield. Just what I'm trying to get to here is, did the retail establishment understand its responsibility to provide a reasonable accommodation to the child with a disability?
I believe they understood, but the complainant filed the complaint just on the child, alleging that he had a disability and that he was denied services. She never told me about the other 2 children. The respondent gave me the video showing when all 3 of them, and I guess the husband, he was a male adult, came into Goodwill. And then when they got to the door and they asked them to put them on, but she never told me about the other children being there. She had no reason to give to them why the other children couldn't put on masks. And
right.
So that's the reason why she actually filed a complaint, because she said the child with the autism was denied service, but it's because the other 2 children didn't have a mask on either. And she never told me about that until I reviewed the respondent's video of them coming into Goodwill. But no, they did not offer the, I think they understood that they would have to give the child a reasonable accommodation, but they also brought up the issue whether the child was actually there to shop or whether it was the parents. I didn't get into that because the child was 7 years old.
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe I'm just not 100% comfortable on this one with the NPC. Just I might want to just have some additional conversation on that, just so I have a better understanding.
Okay. So you want to know if the respondent asked for, give an accommodation to the child that was autistic. So she would have had to send the other children out then. And so we would have just been talking about that one child, but she had 3 children with her under the age of, I think, right. 8, 10, and 11.
Right. And I was a little unclear. It sounded like, and I know the narratives are so short, right? So it sounded like both the mother and the father were present.
I don't know
whether he really can't.
I'm sorry. I don't know if he was a father, but he was an adult male. She never told me about him either.
Oh, okay.
All of this on the video.
Okay. Well, I think. I'm sorry.
The video, on the video, in terms of when they entered the store, they said they were masks were required. They informed them at that point if one of the kids had a disability, they could in fact enter. Did they do that at that point, or just said you can't come in?
No, when the mother and the 3 children, this male adult, entered, she said the clerk said everybody has to have on a mask. The mother did say he's exempt from wearing a mask, but she never gave a reason for the other 2. So the other 2
did the clerk or whoever who said, you have to have a mask, on when she said the other 2, I mean the one that had the disability did she inform them at that point that one could come in so the parent could make a decision?
No, she did not.
I'm with Commissioner Cheney, sort of troubled by at least maybe the way it's written up and the way it's presented. Anything else, Commissioner Cheney, on this one?
Well, I'll send it to
No,
legal and
Chair.
let legal give me some advice on it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions from any other commissioners on the report on the any of the cases? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the recommendation of the staff with the elimination of case 1190 PA?
So
So
moved.
moved. Sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that the recommendation of the staff be approved with the elimination of case number 11 PA. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the recommendation is approved. Next, we move to a report from Education and Outreach Unit. Thank you, Erin, for your report, by the way.
Thank you.
Good morning. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them if I can. I would like to add that Education and Outreach is also working on a second fair housing event. It will be a virtual event, and we are coordinating that with the Louisville Human Relations Commission. It is scheduled for April the 20th, and that's a week before the one that Art Crosby is having. We have not put out the virtual invitation yet with the registration link. We are going to finish up working on that today. So you will have it before the next meeting, and you'll also be able to attend if you're interested. So thank you all very much.
Any questions for Mary Ann from any commissioner? Hearing none, thank you for that, Mary Ann. We'll move on to the next legal unit report. And Joe, you're on stage for the first time with this illustrious body.
Well, thanks again for having me. So please bear with me. I'm a couple weeks in, so my ability to answer questions on individual cases is limited. But before that, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the vision I have for the department. I'm aware of a previous backlog in cases that has been worked through, and I think it has become quite manageable now. A lot of cases have been closed. The current legal staff, Mr. Sells, Ms. Berkhold, with Terrence's help, have really wrapped up a lot of old cases, and those that are still out there are being moved forward. My mission here is to make sure that legal, of course, meets all statutory requirements on the timing of cases, meeting all of our deadlines, moving the cases expeditiously. I also want to make sure that we work the cases fully. And what I mean is that we explore all options for resolution. We don't necessarily need to be confrontational all the time, though, of course, we have the institutional power to do so. I do want to make sure that we explore all options, try to reach good resolutions with the respondents, however we can, and of course, achieve successful resolutions for our complainants. Another thing I want to do with legal is, in private practice, it's very valuable to have institutional support. And one thing that the statute, the Civil Rights Act, provides the commission with is the authority to participate and to encourage private resolution of discrimination claims. And what I'm getting at is that I think the institution can provide support in a lot of different ways to private litigants, and not just the complainants that come through here. One of those ways is through amicus briefing. A lot of my experience is in appellate litigation. And something like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission does is they file amicus briefs in support of private claimants under Title VII. And the commission, I think, could play a very strong role in doing that for a couple of reasons. One, to help private claimants resolve complaints of discrimination in a favorable way. Also as kind of an extension of our enforcement role for the Kentucky Civil Rights Act, but also to help the courts interpret the Kentucky Civil Rights Act in a way that is more favorable to resolve legitimate claims of discrimination. My own private litigation experience showed me that the courts can be quite hostile to civil rights complaints and cases. And a lot of the existing interpretive doctrine is hostile to civil rights complaints and very suspicious of them in ways that the courts are not suspicious to other types of claims like contract claims or tort claims. So I think the commission can play a role in influencing the enforcement of the Kentucky Civil Rights Act, both by ourselves and through private litigants. And we can encourage the courts to either not necessarily change doctrine, but apply doctrine in a way that is more fair to people bringing civil rights complaints. And so that's something that I want to do. I've already reached out to a number of lawyers in Louisville and elsewhere in the state that I know regularly bring Kentucky Civil Rights Act cases. And just put them on notice that, the commission can serve. If you reach the appellate stage of litigation, let us know. And on a case-by-case basis, we may be able to provide some amicus support and provide that institutional voice to, say, the Kentucky Supreme Court or the Kentucky Courts of Appeal to help to give them some guidance on the enforcement of the Kentucky Civil Rights Act and how it should be interpreted. That is the statutory mission of the commission. And I think something KRS 344-190 tells us that we're supposed to be involved in private partnerships to enforce the law. We already do that with like Lexington Fair Housing, for example, but we could also do it in support of private litigants in the courts as well, I think. So that's one mission that I want to pursue here with legal. Is in addition to, of course, moving our case, our internal cases through successful resolution in hearings, conciliation, mediation, etc. So as far as individual cases go, I'm happy to entertain questions via email after the fact as I do some more research. Also, Mr. Sells, I know, is in the meeting and he can answer questions as to the cases he's working. So I'll turn it over to you all for questions.
Are there any questions from any commissioner for Joe? Don't hear any questions, but Joe, let me tell you, as one commission, I think that may reflect this, is that we want to go to the limits of what our statutory authorization is to make certain that we fulfill our statutory duty and responsibility. And so, the idea of filing amicus briefs in cases, sounds very welcoming to me. So, I think we look forward to working with you to make certain we fulfill all of the provisions of the statute and do the work that we can do. And at the same time, use that leverage to make certain that Terrence gets us more money in Frankfurt.
That's right. I mean, an active legal department, I think, really helps the commission in general, in addition to, of course, all Kentuckians in the interest of protecting their civil rights. So it's absolutely my mission to pursue that. Okay.
Well, thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is committee reports. And I didn't check with Terrence as whether the bylaws group or the Community Foundation Approach Group had any reports for the day.
We have nothing new to report. So we're working on that next meeting date.
Okay, well, that's fine. Let's move to new business. And on the new business, let's get back to the issue that Frank Smith brought up regarding the Jefferson County Jail and the issues that are there and what can be or should be the role of the commission in regards to that. Any reaction from any commissioners in terms of that? I think I have some questions for Terrence and Joe once you raise your questions. Okay, hearing none, and I guess with this for both Terrence and Joe, in terms of what is happening at the jail, I guess one is a jurisdictional question, is whether or not the breadth of our statutory authority gives any leeway for being able to hold a hearing or to do an investigation into the jail.
So I'll start and I'll give you time, Joe, to reflect. I know that you had a very strong command of 344 as evidenced by your emails this week. But I do think that in looking at 344 overall, of the things that we are supposed to address, looking at the disproportionate effect in the jails and how a lot of the people being held are pre-trial. I think the last check, it was, and just for reference, I do a weekly call, a weekly Teams meeting with about 36 to 40 community stakeholders on the issues in the jail, especially in relation to just people's civil rights in general. We meet every Monday at 9 o'clock. So if anyone ever wants to jump on, let me know and I can share the link. But looking at the information of who is in there and for what, there is a large contingent of Black or brown people, and it's normally about 80% are pre-trial, and the problem was just poverty, not being able to afford the bail to go home until their trial. The ranges from $100 to upwards of $25,000, but quite a few of them are under $500. And it's, again, the disproportionality of the demographics of who is in there does raise the question from us on, creating some fairness in who or how you're holding people. And so in looking at the impact and our mission of addressing discrimination or discriminatory impacts, even if that's not the stated intent, we are supposed to speak on discriminatory impacts as well. And so from that perspective, I think that there is some room to say something. I don't even know, and that could be working with the law firm that is going to be heading the investigation. That vote is at Metro Council tonight on approving the contract of, I can't remember the firm, to do an investigation, but even communicating with them in the course of that investigation, or some support issuing some support of that investigation, or something, I think is within our purview. I'm not so sure about a full-scale investigation conducted by the agency, because there have been court determinations that the jails themselves are not places of public accommodations for us to be able to investigate or enforce anything. But we could, in looking at some of the provisions in 190, work with others on reaching more fair and equitable outcomes. And so I think that would be our direction, not specific commission initiated investigations, but the commission being in partnership with those conducting an investigation, offering support of that investigation, probably, doing a statement or holding some type of meeting. We also I think it's also in 190, are able to issue or create a task force to look at issues around our civil rights. And so those are the options that I see. And Joe, you may have other thoughts as well to add to that, but as far as our overall purview, I think that it goes to aiding an investigation, but not creating one, and also in the creation of a task force and or offering support and thoughts on the issues.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that Terrence already mentioned this. Jails are don't fall into one of our key three categories of employment, public accommodations, or housing. Jails are generally accepted from the housing rules as well. They have their own special rules and due process considerations. So yeah, our statutory authority in this realm is limited. But like Terrence said, we can provide support in other ways, contributing legal efforts or research to investigations, potentially hosting meetings or facilitating task forces. So yeah, as far as 344 goes, our options are relatively limited in this unique realm of jails. But obviously we have a mission concern, right? Our mission is to protect the civil rights of all Kentuckians. And this is a big problem. The jail deaths and just generally treatment in the jails is a major concern from a human rights perspective.
And I do think what you said, Joe. I do think a task force and issuance of some types of support for a more equitable resolution, I think, are our best bets if we wanted to name individuals, like meet and name people who could come together and discuss solutions. And that type of task force we're enabled to do. We also, budget, notwithstanding, are able to, if we do create a task force, to compensate people for the efforts undertaken in that task force. And so those are things that are within our statutory disposal, so to speak.
Haven't heard that any comment, any additional questions from commissioners, or any suggestions or ideas in terms of where they think we ought to move. Okay, hearing none, I guess where we are is this issue is not going away anytime soon. So Terrence, if you and Joe would get together and come back with a recommendation or suggestion, and let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting. I think that's the way to proceed.
We will do that.
Okay, any other new business? Okay, hearing none, our next scheduled meeting is for April the 21st at 9 a.m. And based on where things are now, I'm at least now planning for that meeting to be an in-person meeting in the Louisville office. Groups are coming back together. So, we will ask that, those in attendance be vaccinated. We have social distancing in the room. But I think it's time for this group to go back to in-person meetings. Several other organizations across the state are doing that. So I think we're not an exception, and we will make available virtual ability to join in the meeting for those that are not comfortable coming or attending that. That's my thoughts at this point. Does anyone else have any thoughts or around that, or any objections to us reconvening in person in April with a virtual option? Okay, anyone? I don't see anyone. Any other matter that needs to come before the body today? Okay, hearing none, you will now entertain a motion for adjournment.
Jim Glenn, motion to adjourn.
And those second?
Second.
Okay, we've been moving second that the meeting be adjourned. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. The meeting is now adjourned. We had a great meeting, and really I think from my perspective, the organization is really moving forward in terms of the things that we're doing. The report we got from Lexington Fair Housing, the legal report we got, we're really making progress. So thank you all, and thank you for a great meeting. And